When Sicily's most feared crime lord walked into that candlelit restaurant on another hollow Thursday night, he had no idea the woman carrying wine through the kitchen doors would shatter 3 years of carefully constructed numbness. One accidental collision, one spilled glass of red across expensive cloth, one look into green eyes that didn't flinch, and Ronan Vale's stone-cold world began to crack wide open. If you want to see how a kingpin falls harder than his enemies ever could, stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you to where it all began. Autumn. The Thursday ritual never changed. Ronan Vale arrived at Osteria della Luna exactly 30 minutes after sunset, always alone, always through the side entrance that opened directly into the private dining room where candles burned low, and the owner knew better than to make conversation. The restaurant sat tucked between crumbling stone buildings in Palermo's oldest quarter, the kind of place tourists walked past without noticing, which was exactly why Ronan had chosen it. 3 years. 156 Thursdays since the funeral. He slid into the corner booth that faced both exits, the worn leather cool against his back, even through the expensive fabric of his suit. The routine settled over him like armor. Order the same meal. Eat half of it. Drink exactly 2 glasses of the house red. Leave cash on the table. Drive home to the villa that echoed with everything he'd lost. The numbness was reliable, predictable, safe. Marco, the owner, appeared with the wine bottle already uncorked, his weathered face carefully neutral. He'd learned years ago not to ask questions, not to offer sympathy, not to acknowledge the grief that hung around Ronan like smoke. The usual, Signor Val? Ronan nodded once. Marco retreated. Through the arched doorway that led to the kitchen, Ronan could hear the familiar sounds of the dinner service, pots clanging, rapid-fire Italian from the line cooks, the hiss of something hitting hot oil, background noise, white noise, the soundtrack to another evening of going through motions that used to mean something. His phone buzzed. A text from Luca, his second in command. Shipment cleared. No problems. Ronan typed back, good. Then he set the phone face down on the table and reached for his wine glass. That was when Elena Hart walked through the kitchen doors carrying a tray loaded with dirty dishes, moving too fast, not looking where she was going. She hit his table at full speed. The wine glass tipped. Red liquid spread across white tablecloth in a blooming stain that looked too much like blood. The dishes clattered, but didn't break. And Elena, dark-haired, green-eyed, maybe 30 at most, froze with her hands still gripping the tray, her mouth forming a perfect O of horror. Oh, God! Oh no, I'm so... She set the tray down with shaking hands, grabbed a napkin, and started dabbing uselessly at the wine stain. I wasn't supposed to come through this way. The kitchen door was stuck and I thought I could just cut through, but clearly that was... I'm making it worse, aren't I? Ronan stared at her. Most people who made mistakes in his presence either ran or groveled. This woman was doing neither. She was frantically trying to clean up the mess, talking to herself more than to him, and when she finally looked up and met his eyes, she didn't look away. I'm so sorry, she said, and she sounded like she meant it. Did any of it get on your suit? No. The word came out rougher than he'd intended. He cleared his throat. It's fine. It's definitely not fine. I just dumped wine all over your dinner. She was American, he realized. The accent was unmistakable. Let me get Marco. He'll want to comp your meal, obviously, and I'll pay for the dry cleaning if... It's fine, Ronan repeated more firmly this time. Accidents happen. Elena paused, napkin still in hand, and really looked at him for the first time. Whatever she saw in his face made her shoulders relax slightly, though her cheeks were still flushed with embarrassment. You're being way nicer about this than you should be, she said. Most people would be screaming at me right now. I don't scream. Lucky me. She managed a small smile. Still, I feel terrible. Can I at least get you a fresh glass? Before Ronan could answer, Marco appeared, his face tight with alarm. He must have seen what happened from the bar. The rapid Italian that poured out of him was directed entirely at Elena, and while Ronan didn't catch every word, the tone was clear. You just spilled wine on the most dangerous man in Sicily. What were you thinking? Except Marco didn't say that last part out loud. He didn't have to. Elena held up both hands. I know, I'm sorry. It was an accident. Signor Vale, please accept my sincerest apologies. Marco had switched to English, his accent thick. This is her second night. She's still learning the layout. I will, of course, cover the cost of Marco. Ronan's voice cut through the panic like a blade. It's fine. Get me another glass, and whatever the lady was supposed to be doing, let her get back to it. The dismissal was clear. Marco nodded quickly and disappeared. Elena lingered for a moment, studying Ronan with an expression he couldn't quite read. Curiosity, maybe, or suspicion. She had to have picked up on Marco's reaction, the way the older man had practically vibrated with fear. Second night, huh? Ronan said. She blinked. What? Marco said it's your second night working here. Oh, yeah. Elena tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. I just moved to Palermo last week. Needed a job. Marco needed someone who could work nights and didn't mind dealing with difficult customers. Though I'm starting to think his definition of difficult might be different from mine. There was something in the way she said it, a joke, but also a test, like she was trying to figure out exactly what kind of man sat in front of her. Smart, Ronan thought, and braver than she had any right to be. Where are you from? He asked, which was a mistake. He shouldn't be asking. Shouldn't be extending this conversation. Should be letting her walk away so he could return to the comfortable, familiar numbness. California, originally. Los Angeles. Elena shifted her weight, glancing back toward the kitchen. But I've been moving around a lot the past few years, trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing with my life, you know? Ronan didn't know. Hadn't had the luxury of uncertainty in decades, but he nodded anyway. Well, Elena said after a beat of silence, I should probably get back before Marco has a stroke. Again, I'm really sorry about the wine. Elena. Her name had been on Marco's lips when he'd rushed over. Ronan filed it away. She paused, eyebrows raised. It's fine, Ronan said for the third time. Forget it. This time her smile reached her eyes. You're pretty zen for a guy who just got wine bombed. Thanks for not getting me fired on day 2. Then she picked up her tray and disappeared back through the kitchen doors, moving more carefully this time. Ronan sat alone with the stained tablecloth and something that felt dangerously close to interest stirring in his chest. He crushed it immediately, locked it down, returned his attention to his phone, to the business that never stopped demanding his focus. But when Marco brought the fresh glass of wine, Ronan found himself asking, The American girl. How long is she planning to stay in Palermo? Marco's expression shuddered. I did not ask, Signor Val. She seems competent, despite the spill. She has good references. Works hard. Marco hesitated. Is there a problem? No problem. Ronan lifted the glass. Just making conversation. The lie tasted sour, but Marco accepted it with visible relief and retreated once more. Ronan drank his wine and told himself he wouldn't think about green eyes and easy smiles. Told himself this changed nothing. Come next Thursday, he'd arrive at the same time, order the same meal, and the American waitress would be just another face in a restaurant full of people he didn't notice. That's what he told himself. He believed it right up until the following Thursday, when Elena brought his wine to the table with a grin and said, No tray this time. I promise I'm a much better waitress when I'm not barreling through forbidden doorways. The second Thursday, Elena wore her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that exposed the elegant line of her neck. She'd learned to move through the restaurant like she belonged there, weaving between tables with practiced grace, laughing at something one of the line cooks shouted from the kitchen. The sound of her laughter cut through the ambient noise of dinner service and landed somewhere in Ronan's chest he'd thought was permanently closed. Red wine, right? She said, approaching his table with a bottle already in hand. Marco said you always get the same thing. Creatures of habit, Ronan said. Nothing wrong with knowing what you like. She poured with steady hands. No spills this time. Though I have to say, if you're coming to an Italian restaurant every week and only ordering wine and pasta, you're missing out on about 60% of the menu. Is that your professional opinion? That's my I've been eating my way through the kitchen's experiments for 2 weeks opinion. Elena set the bottle down. Giuseppe made this thing yesterday with squid ink and roasted peppers that legitimately changed my life. Despite himself, Ronan felt his mouth twitch toward something that might have been a smile. High praise. I don't mess around when it comes to food. She pulled out her order pad. So, same as always, or are you feeling adventurous? The correct answer was same as always. Keep the routine. Don't deviate. Don't engage beyond what was absolutely necessary. Instead, Ronan heard himself say, "What would you recommend?" Elena's face lit up. "Oh, you're letting me pick? Dangerous move, stranger." "I'll risk it." "Okay, trust me on this." She scribbled something on her pad. "And if you hate it, you can go back to your usual next week. Deal?" "Deal." She flashed him another smile and headed back toward the kitchen, and Ronan sat there wondering what the hell he was doing. This wasn't part of the plan. The plan was simple. Show up, eat, leave, repeat. Don't form connections. Don't let anyone close enough to matter. But when Elena returned 20 minutes later with a plate of handmade ravioli and brown butter sauce, garnished with crispy sage and shaved parmesan, she set it down with such obvious pride that refusing it would have felt like a crime. "Giuseppe outdid himself," she announced. "If you don't like this, we can't be friends." Ronan raised an eyebrow. "We're friends?" "We could be. I don't have many of those yet in Palermo." She leaned against the empty chair across from him. "Unless you're the strong, silent type who doesn't do friends. In which case, ignore everything I just said and enjoy your pasta." He should tell her to leave. Should make it clear that whatever she thought this was, she was wrong. Instead, he picked up his fork and tried the ravioli. It was perfect. Rich without being heavy, the sage adding just enough bitterness to balance the butter's sweetness. The pasta thin enough to taste the filling but substantial enough to have texture. The kind of food that reminded you why people wrote poetry about Italian cuisine. "Well?" Elena demanded. "It's good." "Just good?" She pressed a hand to her chest in mock offense. "Giuseppe's going to be devastated." "It's excellent," Ronan amended. "Tell Giuseppe he's an artist." "Now you're talking." She straightened up. "I'll let you eat in peace, but next week I'm picking again." "Assuming I come back." "Oh, you'll come back." She was already walking away, but she tossed the words over her shoulder with absolute certainty. "They always do once I get them hooked on the good stuff." And she was right. Ronan came back the next Thursday. And the one after that. And the one after that. Each week, Elena greeted him with a new recommendation. A new story about her attempts to navigate Palermo's winding streets. A new observation about the cast of characters who made up the restaurant's staff. She talked to him like he was normal. Like he wasn't the man whose name made grown criminals cross themselves. Like he was just another customer who'd wandered in for good food and better company. It should have been irritating. Should have been an intrusion on the carefully maintained distance he kept between himself and the rest of the world. Instead, it became the only hour each week when Ronan felt something other than the weight of his own existence. By the fifth Thursday, he'd started arriving 15 minutes early just to watch her move through the dining room. By the 7th, he knew she took her coffee with too much sugar and not enough cream. By the 10th, she'd stopped asking what he wanted to order and just brought whatever Giuseppe had made that day, sitting down across from him for 5-minute conversations that somehow never felt long enough. "You're mysterious, you know that?" Elena said one night in early November, chin propped on her hand as she studied him with those unsettling green eyes. "Marco won't tell me anything about you. Just keeps saying you're an important customer and I should be polite. You're always polite." "That's not what I mean." She waved a hand. "He gets nervous when you come in, like genuinely nervous, the kind of nervous people get around." She trailed off, clearly searching for the right word. "Around men like me," Ronan finished quietly. Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. "What kind of man are you?" The honest answer would send her running. The dishonest answer would be an insult to whatever this thing was between them, fragile and undefined but undeniably real. "The kind who appreciates good pasta and better company," Ronan said instead. "Beyond that, does it matter?" She considered this for a long moment. In the background, someone laughed. Silverware clinked against plates. The kitchen door swung open and closed. Life continued around them, oblivious. "I guess not," Elena said finally. "I mean, you've been nothing but nice to me. Quiet, maybe. Little bit broody, but nice." "Broody? Oh yeah, you've got this whole dark, mysterious man with a past thing going on." She grinned. "It's very cinematic. Is that a compliment?" "Depends. Are you secretly a vampire? Because that would explain the whole only comes out at night routine." This time, Ronan did smile. Actually smiled. "No vampires." "Damn, there goes my theory." Elena glanced over her shoulder at a table, trying to flag her down. Duty calls, but we're not done with this conversation. There's more to discuss? So much more. Like why you always sit facing the door, and why you never order dessert, and why... She stopped herself, shaking her head. Never mind. That's probably too nosy. Ask. The word surprised them both. Elena bit her lip, hesitating. Then, why Thursdays? You're so consistent about it. Same night, same time. Is it just convenience, or... Ronan looked down at his half-empty wine glass. Red, like blood, like the stain Elena had left on his tablecloth that first night. 3 years ago, Thursdays had been his son's favorite day. The day Mateo had come home from school and they'd cooked dinner together, just the two of them, terrible fathers attempting to make edible food and usually failing but laughing through the disasters. Then Mateo died, and Thursdays became the day Ronan forced himself to eat, to continue existing, to not completely disappear into the violence that defined the rest of his life. He couldn't tell Elena any of that. Routine, he said. I like routine. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Elena's expression suggested she knew it, but she didn't push. Fair enough, she said. We all have our things. Then she was gone again, pulled away by the demands of other customers, and Ronan was left alone with his thoughts and the realization that he'd just shared more with a virtual stranger than he had with anyone in years. Dangerous. This was dangerous. Luca would tell him to stop coming, to cut this off before it became a liability. Attachment was weakness in their world, and weakness got you killed. But when the next Thursday came around, Ronan found himself pulling up to Osteria della Luna at the usual time, and when Elena appeared with a bottle of wine and that warm smile, he couldn't convince himself to care about the danger. Giuseppe made something special for you tonight, she said, setting down a plate of seafood risotto that smelled like the ocean. He's been experimenting with saffron. Tell him thank you. Tell him yourself. He's been trying to get you to come back to the kitchen for weeks. Elena slid into the seat across from him, not for a brief visit this time, but settling in like she planned to stay. Kitchen's closed for the night. Staff meal won't be ready for another 20 minutes, so you're stuck with me. Ronan's pulse kicked up. I don't mind. Good, because I have questions. Why am I not surprised? It's a gift. She folded her arms on the table. Okay, question 1. What do you actually do? And before you give me some vague answer, I should tell you I've developed a theory. Let's hear it. You're either old money, like family fortune situation, or you run some kind of business that requires a lot of late-night meetings and making people nervous. She tilted her head. Am I close? Business, Ronan said carefully. Import-export. Uh-huh. What kind of imports and exports? Various kinds, Elena laughed. You're terrible at this. You know that, right? The more vague you are, the more interesting you become. Maybe I'm just boring. Boring men don't make Marco sweat every time they walk through the door. She leaned forward. But here's the thing. I don't actually care what you do. I mean, I'm curious, obviously, but it doesn't change the fact that you're probably the most interesting person I've met since moving here. You should meet more people. I've met plenty of people. Most of them are exhausting. She paused. You're not. Something shifted in the air between them. The easy banter gave way to something heavier, more honest. Ronan could feel the walls he'd built so carefully starting to crack, and for once, he didn't immediately shore them up. Can I ask you something? He said. Only fair. Why Palermo? You said you've been moving around. Why here? Elena's smile turned wistful. Honestly, I got tired of running. I spent my 20s chasing this idea of what my life should look like. The right career, the right city, the right version of myself. And I just kept ending up disappointed. She traced a pattern on the tablecloth with one finger. So I thought, screw it. I'll go somewhere I've never been, do something completely different, and see what happens. And what's happening? I'm spilling wine on mysterious strangers and eating the best food of my life. She met his eyes. Could be worse. Could be better. Maybe, but better is overrated. Better is usually just another version of running. She straightened up. I'm tired of running. I want to actually be somewhere for once. Ronan understood that more than she could know. He'd been running too, in his own way. Running from grief, from memory, from anything that might pierce the numbness and make him feel again. Then Elena had walked through a kitchen door and crashed into his table, and the running had stopped. "I should let you eat," she said, pushing back from the table, "before it gets cold. Elena." She paused, eyebrows raised. Ronan searched for the right words and came up empty. What was he supposed to say? "Thank you for making me feel human again? Don't stop talking to me? I think you might be the most dangerous thing that's happened to me in years." "The risotto, he said instead. "It's good." Her smile suggested she heard all the things he hadn't said. "I'll tell Giuseppe you approve." December arrived with cold rain that turned Palermo's streets into rivers and kept tourists away from the old quarter. Business picked up at Osteria della Luna, locals seeking warmth and comfort food, but Ronan's Thursday night table remained permanently reserved, a fact that everyone on staff understood without Marco ever explicitly stating it. Elena started wearing a dark green sweater that brought out her eyes. Ronan noticed, tried not to notice, failed spectacularly. "You look cold," she said one Thursday, setting down his wine. Outside, rain hammered against the windows. "Long day?" Something like that. She studied him with that particular intensity she'd developed over the past months. "Want to talk about it?" "No." "Want me to distract you from it?" "Yes." Elena grinned and launched into a story about her disastrous attempt to navigate Palermo's bus system that morning, complete with dramatic reenactments and at least 3 different character voices. By the time she finished, Ronan felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. "Better?" she asked. "Better." "Good, because I'm about to make your night even better." She produced a small wrapped package from her apron pocket. "Early Christmas present." Ronan stared at the package like it might explode. "You didn't have to—" "I wanted to. Open it." Inside was a black leather bookmark with his initials embossed in silver at the top. "I noticed you always have a book in your coat pocket," Elena said, suddenly looking uncertain. "And the corner of the current one is getting pretty beat up, so I thought, I don't know, maybe this would help. If you don't like it, I kept the receipt. I like it." Ronan ran his thumb over the smooth leather. Nobody had given him a gift in years. Couldn't remember the last time anyone had noticed the small details of his life. "Thank you." Elena's relieved smile could have powered the entire restaurant. "You're welcome. Merry Christmas, mysterious stranger." "Ronan." She blinked. "What?" "My name. It's Ronan." He'd been coming here for months, had conversations with her that ranged from ridiculous to surprisingly deep, but he'd never told her his name. Had let her call him you and stranger, and occasionally Mr. Grumpy when she was feeling brave. This felt like crossing a line, letting her have something real. Elena's expression softened. "Ronan," she repeated, testing it. "It fits you. Better than mysterious stranger. Different, more real." She held out her hand across the table. "Nice to officially meet you, Ronan. I'm Elena." He took her hand, meant for it to be a brief shake, professional, appropriate. But the moment their palms touched, something electric shot through him. Her hand was warm, slightly calloused from work, and when she didn't immediately pull away, neither did he. They stayed like that for a heartbeat too long. 2. 3. Then Elena's cheeks flushed and she withdrew, clearing her throat. "Right. Well, I should probably... There are tables that need things." "Elena." She stopped mid-turn. "Would you have dinner with me?" The words came out before Ronan could think better of them. "Not here. Somewhere else. Somewhere without work." Her eyes widened. "Like a date? If you want it to be." "Are you asking because you want it to be? Or because you think I want it to be?" "Both." The honesty made her smile. "Okay." "Okay?" "Yes. Okay. I'll have dinner with you." She laughed. "God, you look terrified asking that question." "I don't usually—" Ronan stopped himself. "Don't usually what?" "Ask women out, let people close, care about anything beyond survival and revenge." Date, he finished. Well, you're doing fine so far. Elena glanced over her shoulder at Marco, who was watching them with poorly concealed interest. I'm off Sunday evening. Does that work? I'll make it work. Then it's a date. She started to walk away, then turned back one more time. Hey, Ronan? Yes? I'm really glad you didn't fire me that first night. Then she disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Ronan alone with a leather bookmark, a racing pulse, and the terrifying realization that somewhere along the way, the numbness had completely shattered. He was feeling things again, wanting things again, and for the first time in 3 years, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Sunday arrived wrapped in rare December sunshine. Ronan changed his clothes 4 times before settling on dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that Elena would later tell him made his gray eyes look silver. He picked her up from the small apartment she rented near the university, and if his hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly during the drive to the restaurant, she didn't mention it. They ended up at a place overlooking the sea, quiet and elegant without being ostentatious, the kind of restaurant where people spoke in low voices and the staff moved like ghosts. This is beautiful, Elena said, accepting the chair Ronan pulled out for her. Do you come here often? First time. Really? She looked surprised. I figured a local would know all the best spots. I know the useful spots, the places where business gets done. Ronan sat across from her. This is different. Good different or bad different? Too early to tell. She laughed. Fair enough. The waiter appeared with menus and wine recommendations. Elena ordered in halting Italian that made the waiter smile with barely concealed amusement. When he left, she groaned. I'm terrible at this language. I've been taking lessons, but my accent is still garbage. It's not garbage. You're being nice. I'm being honest. Ronan poured water into her glass. You're trying. That matters more than perfect pronunciation. Is that the Ronan Vale philosophy on life? Trying matters more than perfection? You looked me up. She had the grace to look slightly guilty. Little bit. Your name is... Let's say it has a presence online. Of course it did. You didn't run half of Sicily's criminal enterprises without leaving a digital footprint, even when you tried to be careful. The question was how much she'd found, how much she knew. And? Ronan kept his voice neutral. What did you learn? Elena set down her water glass. That you're either a very successful businessman or a very successful criminal, depending on who's writing the article. That you lost your son 3 years ago. That people are either terrified of you or in awe of you, sometimes both. She paused. And that none of those things are the person I've been getting to know every Thursday night. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think. Maybe. But I know you tip Giuseppe personally every week because you know Marco takes a cut before it gets to the kitchen. I know you always make sure I get home safe when my shift runs late, even though you think I don't notice your car following me. I know you read poetry and hate dessert and get this look on your face when you're trying not to smile. She leaned forward. So yeah, I might not know everything, but I know enough. Ronan's throat tightened. The things they say online, I don't care. You should. Why? Because you're dangerous? She didn't look afraid. Should have, but didn't. Everyone's dangerous in the right circumstances. You've never been anything but kind to me. That doesn't mean I'm a good man, Elena. I'm not looking for a good man. Her green eyes held his. I'm looking for an honest one. Can you be honest with me? It was a test. Ronan recognized it for what it was. The moment where he either committed to this thing between them or walked away. Walking away would be safer, smarter, would protect them both from the inevitable complications that came with mixing his world with anything soft or real. But he'd spent 3 years being safe, being smart, being dead inside. I can try, he said. The admission seemed to satisfy her. Elena smiled and picked up her menu. Then that's good enough for me. They ordered food neither of them would remember later. Talked about everything and nothing, her childhood in California, his early days in Palermo, books they'd read, places they wanted to visit. The conversation flowed easy, punctuated by laughter and long looks that said more than words could. At some point between the main course and the dessert Ronan didn't order, Elena reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers laced through his like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Can I tell you something? She said. Anything. Well, when I moved here, I thought I was looking for purpose, some grand meaning for my life. She ran her thumb across his knuckles. But maybe I was just looking for a reason to stop running, something worth staying for. Ronan turned her hand over, studying the lines of her palm like they might hold answers. Did you find it? I think so. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. Did you? He'd been asked a lot of questions in his life, business questions, threatening questions, questions designed to extract information or expose weakness. This was none of those things. This was Elena asking if she mattered. If these months of Thursday nights and easy smiles and the careful way they'd circled each other had added up to something real. Yes, Ronan said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. I did. She smiled then, that full, unguarded smile that had been slowly destroying him since the night she'd spilled wine across his table, and Ronan understood with perfect clarity that he was in trouble. The kind of trouble you couldn't shoot your way out of. The kind that meant everything. The drive back to Elena's apartment took longer than it should have. Ronan kept finding reasons to take side streets, to slow down at intersections, to stretch out the minutes before he'd have to let her go. When he finally pulled up outside her building, Elena didn't immediately reach for the door handle. I had a really good time tonight, she said. So did I. Even though I made you talk about feelings? Especially because of that. She laughed softly. You're full of surprises, Ronan Vale. He wanted to kiss her. Had wanted to since she'd taken his hand at dinner, maybe even before that. But something held him back, the awareness that once he crossed that line, there'd be no going back to the safe distance he'd maintained for years. Elena seemed to sense his hesitation. She leaned across the center console and pressed a quick, soft kiss to his cheek. Good night, Ronan. Then she was out of the car and halfway to her door before he could respond. She turned back once, gave a little wave, and disappeared inside. Ronan sat in the dark car for a long moment, one hand touching the spot where her lips had been, feeling like a teenager after his first date instead of a 50-year-old man who'd seen and done things that would make most people sick. His phone buzzed. Luca's name appeared on the screen. What? Ronan answered. We have a situation. The shipment from Marseille, customs flagged it. They're asking questions. Reality crashed back in. The world he'd successfully avoided thinking about for the past 3 hours reasserted itself with brutal efficiency. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Ronan said, and ended the call. He took one last look at Elena's lit window, then drove toward the warehouse district where his real life waited. The next few weeks became a careful balancing act. Ronan's days filled with the kind of business that couldn't be discussed over dinner, meetings with men whose handshakes meant less than nothing, shipments that moved through ports with the help of well-paid officials, problems that got solved with money or threats, or occasionally violence. He'd spent decades building an empire that ran on fear and efficiency, and maintaining it required constant attention. But his Thursdays belonged to Elena. They fell into a new rhythm. Dinner at Osteria della Luna, then walks through Palermo's winding streets, then coffee at a place near the water that stayed open late. Sometimes they talked for hours. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence. Elena asked questions about his life that Ronan answered with careful honesty, never quite lying, but never revealing the full truth either. She told him about her failed engagement back in Los Angeles, the finance guy who'd wanted a trophy wife and couldn't understand why Elena kept choosing passion over practicality. About her parents who'd died in a car accident when she was 23, leaving her untethered and searching for something she couldn't name. I think that's why I kept moving, she said one night in January, huddled close to Ronan on a bench overlooking the Mediterranean. If I never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots, I never had to risk losing them. And now? She looked up at him. Now I'm tired of being safe. Ronan kissed her then, finally, under a sky scattered with stars and the distant sound of waves hitting rocks. She tasted like coffee and possibility, and when she made a small sound of surprise that turned into something deeper, he felt the last of his carefully maintained control start to slip. They went back to his villa that night, the place he'd barely lived in for 3 years, that had become more mausoleum than home. Elena walked through rooms filled with expensive furniture and personal history, touching things carefully, asking questions about the photos he'd left on the mantel. That's Matteo, Ronan said when she paused at a picture of a dark-haired boy with his father's eyes, maybe 14 years old, grinning at the camera. Your son. It wasn't a question. She'd found that information in her internet research, The bare facts of his death reported in news articles that treated it like just another tragedy in a city full of them. Yes. Elena turned to face him. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. But maybe he did want to. Maybe he needed to. Had needed to for 3 years and just hadn't found anyone who felt safe enough to tell. He was 15, Ronan said, the words coming out rough. Caught in crossfire meant for me. Wrong place, wrong time, my fault. Ronan, it was my fault, he repeated, harder this time. He died because of the life I chose. Because I thought I could keep him separate from the business, keep him safe. I was wrong. Elena crossed the space between them and took his face in both hands, forcing him to look at her. It wasn't your fault. You didn't pull the trigger. I might as well have. No, someone else made that choice. Someone else took him from you. Her thumbs brushed his cheekbones. And I am so sorry that happened, but you can't carry that blame forever. It'll destroy you. Maybe I deserve to be destroyed. Well, I don't agree. She pulled him down until their foreheads touched. And I'm not going anywhere, so you're stuck with me disagreeing. Something broke open in Ronan's chest. He pulled Elena close and held on like she was the only thing keeping him from flying apart. And maybe she was. When he finally kissed her again, it was desperate and honest, and everything he hadn't let himself feel in so long, he'd forgotten what it was like. They made it to his bedroom eventually. Ronan undressed her slowly, carefully, like she might disappear if he moved too fast. Elena was patient with him, seemed to understand that this meant more than just physical intimacy. This was trust. This was letting someone see him completely and hoping they wouldn't run. She didn't run. Afterward, she fell asleep curled against his side, one hand over his heart. Ronan lay awake watching her breathe, feeling something uncomfortably close to happiness and trying not to think about all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. Morning came too soon. Elena stretched like a cat, smiled sleepily at him, and said, I should probably get home. I have a shift at 4. Call in sick. Can't. Giuseppe's testing a new menu and he gets cranky when I'm not there to taste things. She kissed his jaw. But I'm off tomorrow. We could do this again, the sleeping over part. And maybe the parts that came before the sleeping. I'd like that. She got dressed while Ronan watched, pulling on yesterday's clothes and finger-combing her hair into something resembling order. At the door she paused. Thank you, she said. For what? For letting me in. I know that's not easy for you. She touched his face one more time. I meant what I said last night. I'm not going anywhere. Then she was gone, and Ronan was left in the too-quiet villa with the smell of her shampoo on his pillows and a feeling in his chest he refused to name yet. His phone rang. Luca again. We need to meet, his second-in-command said without preamble. There's been a development. Ronan closed his eyes. What kind of development? The kind we should discuss in person. 1 hour, the usual place. The usual place was a warehouse on the outskirts of the city that Ronan used for meetings he didn't want overheard. When he arrived, Luca was already there, along with 3 other men Ronan trusted as much as he trusted anyone in this business. Which was to say, not very much at all. What's this about? Ronan asked. Luca pulled out his phone and showed him a series of photographs. Ronan, Elena, leaving the restaurant, walking through the city, outside his villa. The images were grainy but clear enough. Who took these? Ronan's voice had gone cold. We don't know yet. They were delivered to Marco this morning with a note. Luca handed over a piece of paper. The message was brief. The Kingpin has found something precious. How unfortunate. Ronan crushed the paper in his fist. Find out who sent this. I want a name by tonight. Already working on it, Luca said. But Ronan, you need to consider the possibility that this is... I know what this is. A threat. A warning. Someone had noticed his attachment to Elena and was letting him know they could use it against him. The smart move would be to end things now. Cut Elena loose before whoever was watching decided to escalate from surveillance to action. Push her away. Make her hate him. Keep her safe by making sure she wanted nothing to do with him. Ronan had built his entire life on smart moves, but the thought of walking away from Elena made him feel like someone had reached into his chest and started squeezing. Increase security around the restaurant, he said instead. I want eyes on Elena at all times. She doesn't go anywhere without someone watching. That's going to be hard to do without her noticing. Then don't let her notice. And Luca... Ronan met his second's eyes. If anything happens to her, I will burn this city to the ground. Are we clear? Luca nodded slowly. Clear. The next Thursday, Ronan arrived at Osteria della Luna to find 2 new faces working security. They were good. He almost didn't spot them, but he'd been doing this long enough to recognize professionals when he saw them. Marco had followed his instructions. Elena appeared with her usual smile, but Ronan could see the question in her eyes. She knew something was off. You okay? She asked, setting down his wine. You seem tense. Work stuff. Want to talk about it? Not really. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Okay, but if you change your mind, I'm here. That was the problem. She was here, in his life, in his head, in the crosshairs of anyone who wanted to hurt him, and he couldn't seem to make himself regret it enough to let her go. Giuseppe outdid himself that night with a pasta dish that probably required illegal amounts of butter. Elena brought it out personally, sliding into the seat across from Ronan like she'd been doing for months now. So, she said, I've been thinking. Dangerous. She kicked him lightly under the table. I've been thinking about maybe staying in Palermo permanently, like getting a real apartment instead of that month-to-month place. Maybe taking some classes at the university, actually putting down roots for once. Ronan's heart did something complicated. Yeah? Yeah, I mean, I've been here almost 6 months now. Longest I've stayed anywhere since college. And I like it. The city, the job, She paused, color rising in her cheeks. The company. You should do it. You think so? I think you should do whatever makes you happy. Elena reached across the table and laced her fingers through his. You make me happy. This makes me happy. I know it's probably too soon to say stuff like that, and you've got your whole mysterious business thing going on, and I'm sure there are complications I don't understand yet. But I'm happy, Ronan. For the first time in a long time, I'm actually happy. He wanted to tell her the truth then. All of it. Wanted to explain exactly what kind of man she was tying herself to, what kind of danger she was inviting into her life by staying. But the words stuck in his throat, tangled up with fear and hope, and the desperate wish that maybe, somehow, this could work. I'm happy too, he said instead, and watched her smile light up the room. They had 3 good weeks after that. 3 weeks where Ronan almost convinced himself that he could have both, the empire he'd built and the woman who'd somehow slipped past every defense he'd constructed. Elena moved into a better apartment closer to the restaurant, started talking about enrolling in Italian literature classes, spent most nights at Ronan's villa, filling the empty spaces with laughter and warmth and life. Ronan's people found nothing. No leads on who'd sent the photographs, no indication of an imminent threat. Luca suggested maybe it had been a bluff, some minor player trying to rattle him. Ronan wanted to believe that. Should have known better. The call came on a Tuesday, which should have been his first warning. Nothing good ever happened on Tuesdays. We have her. The voice on the other end was distorted, electronically altered. The American girl, your weakness. Every muscle in Ronan's body locked tight. If you've hurt her, not yet. Whether we do depends entirely on you. A pause. You have something we want. The shipment from Marseille, the one customs flagged. We know you moved it anyway. We want it. Not possible. Then the girl dies. Simple economics, Signor Val. One life for several million in product. Seems like an easy choice. The line went dead. Ronan immediately called Elena's phone. It rang once, then went to voicemail. He tried the restaurant. Marco answered on the 3rd ring. Is Elena there? Ronan didn't bother with pleasantries. No, she left about an hour ago. Said she was going to the market for... Signor Vale, what's wrong? Ronan was already moving, grabbing his keys, his gun, his phone. Lock down the restaurant. Nobody in or out until I say otherwise. He called Luca next. Elena's been taken. I want every resource we have on this. Find her. What happened? Someone wants the Marseille shipment. They're using her as leverage. Ronan was in his car now, driving toward Elena's apartment even though he knew she wouldn't be there. Had to check anyway. I need locations of every warehouse, every property owned by anyone who might have the capability to pull this off. And I need it 5 minutes ago. Ronan, the shipment. I don't care about the shipment. Find her. He drove through Palermo like a man possessed, checking every place Elena might have gone, every location he could think of. Her apartment was empty, the door unlocked, her purse on the counter like she'd just stepped out for a moment. The market vendors hadn't seen her. The coffee shop near the water had no record of her coming in. She was gone. His phone rang again, same distorted voice. Midnight. The old cannery on Via Messina. Come alone with the shipment location, or come to collect a body. Your choice. Ronan pulled over to the side of the road and forced himself to think, forced past the rage and fear that threatened to overwhelm everything else. Whoever had taken Elena wasn't stupid. They'd chosen their moment carefully, waited until she was vulnerable, isolated. Had probably been planning this since those first photographs arrived. This was his fault. He'd known the risks and pursued her anyway, had convinced himself that he could protect her while keeping her close. He'd been wrong. Luca called back. I've got 3 possible locations, all owned by shell companies that trace back to Santoro. Santoro. A mid-level player trying to make a name for himself. Ambitious and stupid, a dangerous combination. Which property is on Via Messina? Ronan asked. The old fish cannery, been abandoned for years. That's where they'll be. Ronan was already turning the car around. I need a team ready to move, full tactical. We hit them hard and fast. Ronan, if you go in shooting, they'll kill her. If I don't, they'll kill her anyway. Santoro's not smart enough to play this long game. He wants the shipment and me dead. Elena's just bait. The rage settled into something colder, more focused. This was familiar territory. This was the part of himself Ronan understood, the part that solved problems with violence and precision. He'd kept this side of himself away from Elena, had tried to be someone softer, someone who deserved the way she looked at him. But now the people who'd taken her were about to learn exactly what kind of man Ronan Vale really was, and they were going to regret it. Midnight came with fog rolling in from the sea. The old cannery loomed against the sky like something out of a nightmare, all broken windows and rusted metal. Ronan approached from the south with Luca and 8 other men, all of them armed, all of them willing to die on his order. Remember, Ronan said quietly, we get Elena out first. Everything else is secondary. They moved in silence, covering ground with the efficiency of men who'd done this 100 times before. Ronan spotted Santoro security immediately. 2 men at the front entrance, 3 more patrolling the perimeter. Sloppy. Overconfident. Fatal mistakes. Ronan's team neutralized the exterior guards without firing a shot. Inside, they could hear voices echoing through the cavernous space. Ronan moved toward the sound, his gun steady in his hand, every sense heightened. Then he saw her. Elena was tied to a chair in the center of the room, duct tape over her mouth, blood matting her dark hair on one side. But she was alive, conscious. Her green eyes found his across the distance and went wide. Santoro stood next to her, a gun pressed to her temple. 4 more men flanked him, all armed. Punctual, Santoro called out. I appreciate that in a business partner. Let her go. Ronan's voice was dead calm. This is between us. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, she seems pretty involved. Santoro grabbed Elena's hair, wrenching her head back. She made a muffled sound of pain that turned Ronan's vision red. Did you bring what I asked for? First, let me see that she's unharmed. You can see her right here. I want to hear her voice. Proof of life. Santoro considered this, then ripped the tape from Elena's mouth. She gasped, working her jaw. Ronan, she said, and her voice was steady despite everything. Don't give them anything. I'm not... Santoro backhanded her. The crack of impact echoed through the cannery. Ronan moved without thinking. 3 steps forward before Luca grabbed his arm, holding him back. But Santoro had seen the reaction, and his smile turned cruel. Oh, this is better than I thought. You actually care about her. He traced the barrel of his gun down Elena's cheek. Tell me, Vale, is she worth millions in product? Is she worth your reputation? Because that's what this is going to cost you. Name your price, Ronan said. Money, territory, the shipment, whatever you want. Just let her go. See, that's the problem. I don't think you understand the position you're in. Santoro pressed the gun harder against Elena's temple. I don't just want the shipment. I want everything. Your empire, your contacts, your entire operation. And you're going to give it to me, because if you don't, I'm going to put a bullet in her head and make you watch." Elena's eyes never left Ronan's face. Even terrified, even bleeding, she looked at him with something that might have been trust. He didn't deserve it. "You have 10 seconds to decide," Santoro said. 10, 9, 8. Ronan raised his gun. Everything happened at once. The lights went out, plunging the cannery into darkness. Luca and his team opened fire from 3 different positions. Ronan moved toward Elena, trusting his memory of the space, trusting his team to cover him. He heard Santoro curse, heard the chair scraping as Elena threw herself sideways. Then Ronan was there, cutting the ropes, pulling her against him. "I've got you," he said into her hair. "I've got you." Ronan, behind... He spun, fired twice. Santoro went down, the gun falling from his hand. Around them, the firefight continued for another 30 seconds before silence fell. Luca appeared out of the darkness. "Clear. All targets down." Ronan lifted Elena into his arms, carrying her toward the exit. She was shaking, going into shock, but she wrapped her arms around his neck and held on. "You came for me," she whispered. "Of course I came for you." "I thought, when he said you had to choose..." "There was no choice, Moa," Ronan said, and meant it. "There was only ever you." He carried her all the way to his car, placed her carefully in the passenger seat, drove to a private doctor he kept on retainer for situations exactly like this. The doctor checked her over, confirmed that besides a concussion and some bruising, she was physically fine. Ronan stayed with her the entire time, holding her hand, smoothing her hair back from her face, trying not to think about all the ways this could have ended differently. When they finally made it back to his villa, dawn was breaking over the Mediterranean. Elena was asleep before they hit the bedroom, exhausted by trauma and fear. Ronan laid her down gently, covered her with blankets, and then stood watching her breathe for a long time. His phone buzzed. "Luca. All threats neutralized. Santoro's operation has been dismantled. We're secure." Ronan typed back. "Good. Keep eyes on Elena. 24/7. I want to know if anyone even looks at her wrong." Then he climbed into bed next to her and pulled her close, and for the first time since his son died, Ronan Vale let himself cry. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and the steady sound of Ronan's breathing beside her. For a moment she forgot everything, the kidnapping, the gun pressed to her head, the cold certainty that she was going to die in that abandoned cannery. Then she moved and her ribs screamed in protest, and it all came rushing back. She turned carefully to look at Ronan. He was still asleep, one arm thrown across his eyes, his face more relaxed than she'd ever seen it. But even in sleep, there was tension in his jaw, a tightness around his mouth that spoke of nightmares barely kept at bay. He'd killed for her last night. She'd heard the gunshots, seen the bodies on the floor as he'd carried her out, had watched this man she thought she knew transform into something colder, more dangerous, more lethal than she'd let herself imagine. And he'd done it all to save her. Elena reached out slowly, traced the line of his jaw with one finger. Ronan's eyes opened immediately, alert in the way of someone who'd learned to wake up ready for violence. "Hey," she said softly. "How do you feel?" His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing carefully over the bruise she could feel blooming on her cheekbone. "Like I got pistol whipped and kidnapped by a psychopath." She tried to smile. "So, could be worse." "Elena? Don't." She pressed her fingers to his lips. "Don't apologize. Don't tell me this is your fault. Don't do whatever speech you've been rehearsing in your head about how I should run far away from you." Ronan caught her hand, held it against his chest. "You should run far away from me." "Too late. I'm a terrible runner, remember? I told you that months ago." She shifted closer despite the protest from her ribs. "What happened last night? That wasn't on you. That was on the asshole who thought kidnapping someone was a good business strategy. It happened because of me, because you were with me. Yeah, and I'm still here, still choosing to be here." Elena looked him straight in the eyes. "I'm not going to pretend last night wasn't terrifying. I'm not going to act like finding out my boyfriend is some kind of crime boss doesn't require some processing. But I'm also not running, so you can either accept that or spend the next however long trying to push me away. But I promise you, I'm more stubborn than you are patient." Something flickered across Ronan's face. Relief, maybe, or disbelief. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. I've spent the last 6 months falling for you, the real you, not some sanitized version. And yeah, maybe I didn't know all the details of your business, but I'm not an idiot, Ronan. I knew you weren't importing olive oil or whatever cover story you were going with. So you knew. I suspected. There's a difference. She touched his face. I suspected you were involved in something complicated and probably illegal. I also knew you were kind to me, protective of the people who worked for you, carrying around grief that was slowly destroying you. Those things mattered more. They shouldn't. Well, they did. They do. Elena took a shaky breath. Can I ask you something? Anything. The man who took me. Santoro. Is he dead? Ronan didn't flinch. Yes. Did you kill him? Yes. She nodded slowly, processing this. In movies, this was the moment where the innocent woman recoiled in horror, where she saw the monster and ran screaming. But Elena had looked into Santoro's eyes last night, had seen the casual cruelty there, the absolute willingness to end her life without a second thought. And she'd seen Ronan's face when Santoro had hit her, seen the rage and fear and desperate love. Okay, she said finally. Ronan's eyebrows rose. Okay? I'm not going to pretend I'm thrilled about the violence. I'm not wired that way. But I'm also not going to lie here and tell you I wish you'd let him live so he could try again. She met his eyes. I'm glad you came for me. I'm glad I'm alive. And if that makes me a bad person, I guess I'll learn to live with it. He pulled her close then, careful of her injuries, and buried his face in her hair. You're not a bad person. You're the best person I've ever known. That's a pretty low bar if I'm competing with kidnappers and crime lords. Elena. Sorry, inappropriate humor is how I cope with trauma. She pressed her face against his shoulder. Can we just stay like this for a while? I don't want to think about anything else yet. So they did. They stayed in bed while the sun climbed higher, while the day moved forward without them, while Ronan's phone buzzed repeatedly with messages he ignored. Elena dozed on and off, her sleep restless and interrupted by flashes of memory that made her jerk awake. Each time, Ronan was there, solid and real, pulling her back from the edge of panic. Around noon, there was a knock at the bedroom door. Luca's voice came through. Ronan, we need to talk. Later. It can't wait. Ronan cursed softly. 5 minutes. He started to pull away, but Elena caught his hand. It's okay. Go handle whatever crisis needs handling. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right back. I know. She watched him leave, then carefully pushed herself upright. Her reflection in the mirror across the room looked worse than she felt. Bruised, battered, with dried blood still in her hairline that she'd been too exhausted to wash out last night. She looked like someone who'd barely survived something terrible. She looked like someone who needed to make a choice. Elena had spent her entire adult life running from anything that felt too hard, too complicated, too real. Had convinced herself that staying mobile meant staying safe, that never putting down roots meant never having to feel the pain of losing them. But sitting in that cannery with a gun to her head, knowing she might die without ever seeing Ronan again, Elena had realized something important. Safety was an illusion. You could run forever and still end up in danger. The only real choice was whether the life you lived was worth the risks you took, and Ronan was worth it. She found a robe in his closet, wrapped herself in it, and made her way carefully downstairs. Voices drifted from Ronan's study, his and Luca's, speaking rapid Italian. Elena caught maybe one word in 5, but the tone was clear enough. Tense, urgent. She knocked on the doorframe. Both men looked up. Sorry, she said. I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just looking for coffee. Kitchen's through there. Ronan pointed. I'll make you something. You're in the middle of something. I can figure it out. Elena? Ronan, I've been making my own coffee for over a decade. I think I can handle your fancy Italian espresso machine. She managed a smile. Besides, you two clearly have business. I'll stay out of the way. She left before he could argue, found the kitchen, and spent 10 minutes trying to figure out the espresso machine before giving up and just making regular drip coffee in a pot she found in the back of a cabinet. The familiar ritual helped, normal tasks for a morning that felt anything but normal. Luca appeared in the doorway while she was pouring her second cup. Up close, he was younger than she'd thought, maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes and the kind of posture that suggested military training. "Signorina Hart," he said, "I wanted to apologize." "For what?" "We should have been watching you more closely. Should have anticipated Santoro would make a move." His English was excellent, barely accented. What happened was unacceptable. Elena wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "You couldn't have known." "It's our job to know, to protect the people Ronan cares about." Luca hesitated. "He's different with you. Better. We all see it." "Different how?" "Present, engaged. Before you he was going through motions. Now he's actually living again." Luca's expression softened slightly. "I knew his son. Matteo was a good kid. After he died, we thought we'd lost Ronan too. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. Then you showed up and spilled wine on his table, and something changed." "Ani, titi, mamosi. I didn't really do anything. You did everything. You reminded him what it felt like to be human." Luca pulled out his phone, typed something. "I'm assigning you a security detail, 2 people, rotating shifts. They'll stay out of sight, but they'll be there." "Is that necessary?" "After last night? Yes, absolutely necessary." He met her eyes. "Santoro isn't the only one who'll see you as leverage. Word's already spreading that Ronan Vale has a weakness. That makes you a target." The casual way he said it made Elena's stomach drop. "So what am I supposed to do? Live in a bubble? Never leave this house?" "Live your life. Just do it with the understanding that people are watching." Luca's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at Elena. "I should go, but Signorina Hart..." "Elena, if you need anything at all, you call me. Ronan trusts you. That means we all do." He left her alone with her coffee and the sudden weight of what she'd gotten herself into. This wasn't just dating a complicated man. This was stepping into a world with rules she didn't understand, dangers she couldn't predict, and consequences that could be fatal. Elena thought about her apartment, her job, the simple life she'd been building, thought about calling Marco and quitting, packing her bags, buying a plane ticket to somewhere far from Sicily and men with guns and midnight rescues from abandoned warehouses. Then she thought about Ronan's face when he'd found her last night, the absolute certainty in his voice when he'd said, "There was only ever you." She set down her coffee mug and went to find him. Ronan was still in his study, now alone, staring at a laptop screen with the kind of intensity that suggested he wasn't really seeing it. He looked up when Elena came in. "You should be resting," he said. "I should be a lot of things. Smarter, probably. More self-preserving." She crossed to his desk, perched on the edge. "But I'm not. So here we are. Elena, I want to understand." She cut him off. "Not everything. I don't need to know the details of your business or whatever it is you do, but I need to understand what being with you means, what I'm signing up for." Ronan leaned back in his chair. "It means danger. It means always looking over your shoulder. It means there will be people who want to hurt you to get to me." "Okay, what else?" "It means I can't promise you a normal life, can't give you the things most women want, quiet dinners without security, vacations without checking exit routes, a relationship that doesn't come with a body count. I've never been good at normal anyway." Elena reached out, took his hand. "What can you promise me?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I can promise I will do everything in my power to keep you safe, that I will never lie to you about who I am or what I do, that if you wake up one day and decide this is too much, I'll let you go without making it harder than it has to be. And if I don't want to go, then I can promise to love you better than I've loved anyone, to try to be worthy of the fact that you stayed." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But Elena, you need to really think about this. What happened last night? That's my world. Violence and danger and impossible choices. It won't change just because I want it to. I'm not asking it to change. I'm asking if there's room in that world for me." "There's room. There's always been room." Ronan pulled her into his lap, careful of her bruises. "But I need you to be sure." Elena looked at this man who'd somehow become everything to her in the space of 6 months, who'd shown her his grief and his violence and his unexpected capacity for tenderness, who'd killed for her without hesitation and then cried while she slept. "I'm sure," she said. He kissed her then, soft and careful, and Elena felt something settle in her chest. Not peace, exactly, but certainty. The bone-deep knowledge that whatever came next, wherever this dangerous path led, she was choosing to walk it with eyes wide open. When they finally broke apart, Ronan rested his forehead against hers. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. Lucky me. Yeah, Elena agreed. Lucky you. The next few days established a new normal. Elena went back to work despite Ronan's protests, determined not to let fear control her life. Her security detail turned out to be a woman named Sophia and a man called Marco, not the restaurant owner, but a former soldier who'd worked for Ronan for years. They were professionals, unobtrusive, and after the initial awkwardness, Elena almost forgot they were there. Almost. Giuseppe welcomed her back with tears and an endless stream of Italian that she was pretty sure included several creative curses directed at Santoro's memory. The kitchen staff treated her like fragile glass for about an hour before her sharp response to someone asking if she was okay to work reminded them that she wasn't broken. Marco, the owner, pulled her aside during her first shift back. Signorina Elena, if you need time, I don't. I need to work. I need normal. She tied on her apron. Besides, if I sit around thinking about it, I'll just make myself crazy. He nodded, understanding in his weathered face. Then you work. But if you change your mind, I'll tell you, promise. Ronan showed up at the restaurant that Thursday like he always did, but this time Elena sat down across from him before he'd even ordered, ignoring the tables that needed attention. Hi, she said. Hi yourself. He was looking at her like he still couldn't quite believe she was real. How was your day? Long. Feet hurt. Giuseppe tried out this new sauce that I'm 90% sure contained illegal amounts of garlic. She reached across the table for his hand. But good. Normal. I needed normal. I'm glad. They sat like that for a moment, just holding hands across the table while the restaurant moved around them. Then Elena said, Tell me about Matteo. Ronan's expression shuddered. Elena, I want to know. Not because I'm morbid or trying to push you, but because he was important to you, and that makes him important to me. She squeezed his hand. You don't have to if you're not ready, but I'm here if you are. He was quiet for so long she thought he might refuse. Then he started talking. He loved music. Wanted to be a composer. Spent hours at the piano driving his mother crazy. A ghost of a smile crossed Ronan's face. Had my temper but her laugh. Terrible at football but insisted on playing anyway. Read everything he could get his hands on. Used to carry books everywhere, even to dinner. He sounds wonderful. He was. He was everything good in my life. Ronan's voice roughened. His mother died when he was 8, cancer. After that, it was just the two of us. I tried to keep him separate from the business, but he was smart. He knew what I did. We fought about it constantly. What did he want you to do? Quit. Walk away. Use the money we had to start something legitimate. Ronan looked down at their joined hands. He had this whole plan. We'd move to the coast, open a restaurant, live quiet lives. Said I could learn to cook. He'd handle the music for the dining room. It was a nice fantasy. Why didn't you do it? Because I was arrogant. Thought I could have both, the empire and the normal life. Thought I was smart enough, careful enough, powerful enough to keep them separate. His jaw tightened. I was wrong. Elena ached for him. For the man he'd been before loss had carved out all the soft parts. How did it happen? Car bomb. Meant for me, but I'd stayed late at a meeting. Sent my driver to pick up Matteo from school instead. They were 2 blocks from the house when it went off. Ronan's voice had gone flat, emotionless. The tone of someone who'd told this story so many times it had lost its power to hurt him, except it hadn't. She could see the pain in every line of his face. He died instantly. The driver, too. I was the one who had to identify the bodies. Ronan, I killed everyone involved. Took me 6 months, but I found every single person who'd played any part in the attack. Made sure they understood exactly what they'd taken from me before I ended it. He met her eyes. Does that scare you? It should have. Elena knew it should have. But all she felt was grief for a boy she'd never met and the father who'd lost him. No, she said quietly. It doesn't. It should. Maybe, but it doesn't. She stood up, came around to his side of the table, and wrapped her arms around him from behind. I'm sorry you lost him. I'm sorry you had to go through that. And I'm sorry the world is cruel enough that you felt like revenge was the only answer. Ronan's hand came up to cover hers where it rested on his chest. Every Thursday, I came here because it was the day we used to cook together. Thought if I kept the ritual alive, it would feel like he wasn't completely gone. But it just made it worse, made the absence sharper. And then I spilled wine on you. And then you spilled wine on me. He turned in his seat to look up at her. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than grief. Elena kissed the top of his head. He'd be happy, you know, that you're letting yourself live again. You didn't know him. I know what it's like to lose people you love. My parents died 6 years ago. Car accident, wrong place, wrong time, gone in an instant. She came around to face him. And I know they'd want me to keep living, to find joy where I can, to not let their death be the thing that defines the rest of my life. I think Matteo would want the same for you. Ronan pulled her down into his lap. How did you get so wise? Lots of therapy and too much time alone with my thoughts. She settled against him. We're a pair, aren't we? Couple of broken people, trying to figure out how to be whole. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it's more than enough. They stayed like that until other customers needed attention, until Giuseppe shouted something from the kitchen, until real life intruded and demanded Elena get back to work. But something had shifted between them. Some final wall had come down. That night, back at the villa, Ronan showed Elena pictures of Matteo. Baby photos, school pictures, candid shots of a dark-haired boy growing into a teenager who looked so much like his father, it hurt. Elena listened to stories about piano recitals and failed cooking experiments and arguments about everything from politics to proper pasta technique. She met Matteo through his father's memories, and she mourned the future that had been stolen from both of them. Thank you, Ronan said when they were finally in bed. Elena curled against his side. For what? For listening, for not running, for making me believe I deserve a second chance at this. You do deserve it, and so do I. Elena pressed a kiss to his shoulder. We both deserve to be happy, even if the path there is messy and complicated and sometimes involves kidnapping. Please don't make jokes about the kidnapping. Too soon? Too soon. She smiled against his skin. Okay, I'll workshop better material. Elena? Yeah? I love you. The words hung in the air between them, simple, honest, terrifying. Elena tilted her head up to look at him. I love you too. And in that moment, in the darkness of a bedroom in a villa overlooking the Mediterranean, two broken people found something worth healing for. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Elena had nightmares about the cannery, woke up gasping and disoriented until Ronan's voice brought her back. She jumped at loud noises, couldn't stand having her back to doors, developed a probably unhealthy attachment to knowing where Ronan was at all times. But she also laughed, worked, made plans for the future that extended past next week, started taking Italian lessons seriously, determined to understand the rapid-fire conversations happening around her, moved the rest of her things into the villa, and turned one of the empty rooms into a study where she could take her online literature classes. Ronan, for his part, seemed determined to prove he could be the kind of man who deserved her presence. He showed her parts of Palermo tourists never saw, introduced her to people from his life, carefully, with Sofia and Marco always nearby, but genuinely trying to integrate her into his world. Surprised her with small gifts that showed he paid attention to the things she loved. They fought sometimes, about her safety, about his overprotective instincts, about the fact that he still tried to make decisions for her without asking. Elena held her ground, refused to be treated like fragile glass, demanded to be seen as a partner rather than something to be protected. And slowly, painfully, Ronan learned to let her in, to trust that she could handle the truth of his life, to believe that her love wasn't conditional on him being someone other than who he was. 2 months after the kidnapping, Elena woke to find Ronan already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She mumbled, still half asleep. Marry me. That woke her up. What? Marry me, he repeated. I know it's fast. I know we should probably wait, do this properly, but I don't want to wait. I wasted 3 years being numb, and I'm done wasting time. Elena pushed herself upright. Are you seriously proposing to me at 6 in the morning without even coffee? Is that a no? That's a, I need you to ask me again when I'm fully conscious and possibly with a ring involved. She poked his chest. This is important, Ronan. You don't get to half-ass it. A smile tugged at his mouth. So that's not a no. That's a ask me properly and we'll see. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and Elena thought maybe she didn't need coffee after all. 3 days later, Ronan took her to dinner at a restaurant on a cliff overlooking the sea. They ate slowly, talked about nothing important, and when dessert came, which Ronan had actually ordered, a first, there was a ring sitting on top of the tiramisu. Better? He asked. Elena stared at the ring. Simple, elegant, a diamond that caught the candlelight and threw it back in brilliant sparks. Much better. Elena Hart. Ronan took her hand. You crashed into my life and refused to leave. You saw the worst parts of me and stayed anyway. You make me want to be better, do better, live better. Will you marry me? She was crying. When had she started crying? Yes, Elena said through tears. Yes, absolutely, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, and Elena thought about all the choices that had led her here. The failed engagement in Los Angeles, the decision to move to Palermo, the split-second moment when she'd barreled through a kitchen door without looking. Every mistake, every detour, every moment of uncertainty had brought her to this man, this life, this future she hadn't known she wanted. I love you, she said. I love you too. Ronan pulled her close. And I promise, I will spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. I already know I did. And standing there on a cliff in Sicily, engaged to a man who'd killed for her and cried for her, and loved her with a ferocity that should have been frightening but somehow wasn't, Elena finally understood what it meant to stop running. It meant standing still long enough to let happiness catch up. The engagement changed things in ways Elena hadn't anticipated. The ring on her finger felt like both a promise and a declaration, and within 24 hours it seemed like everyone in Palermo's underworld knew that Ronan Vale was getting married. The reactions were mixed. Some of Ronan's associates sent gifts, expensive, impersonal things that arrived with cards bearing names Elena didn't recognize. Others went silent, which Luca explained was either a sign of disapproval or careful neutrality. And a few, the ones Ronan trusted most, actually came to the villa to meet her properly. They want to see if you're real, Ronan said the morning before the first of these meetings. If this is actually happening or just some elaborate midlife crisis. Elena looked up from her coffee. And what do you want me to do? Perform? Prove I'm worthy of the great Ronan Vale? I want you to be yourself. That's all you've ever needed to be. Easy for you to say. You're not the American waitress marrying into Sicilian royalty. I'm hardly royalty. You know what I mean. She set down her mug. These people are going to judge me. Judge us. And I'm not exactly equipped for this, Ronan. I don't speak the language well enough. Don't understand the politics. Don't know how to navigate whatever hierarchy exists in your world. He came around the table, tilted her face up to meet his eyes. You survived being kidnapped by a man who wanted to destroy me. You looked him in the eye and didn't break. That's all the credentials you need. That's not the same as knowing which fork to use at a formal dinner. We're Sicilian. We only have one fork. He kissed her forehead. Stop worrying. They'll love you. They didn't love her. Not at first. The first meeting was with a man named Dante Russo, who ran operations in the eastern part of the island and had known Ronan for over 20 years. He arrived at the villa with 2 bodyguards and an expression that suggested he'd already decided Elena was a mistake. So, Dante said in heavily accented English after the initial pleasantries were done, you are the woman who has captured our Ronan's heart. I spilled wine on him, actually. The heart thing came later. Elena kept her voice light, but she could feel the weight of his scrutiny. Dante didn't smile. You understand what you are marrying into? The life, the expectations, the dangers? I got a pretty good preview 2 months ago when someone tried to use me as leverage. So yeah, I understand. And you stay anyway. Why? It was a blunt question, but Elena appreciated the directness. Because I love him. Because he makes me happy. Because the idea of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been is worse than any danger I might face. Dante studied her for a long moment, then looked at Ronan. She has spine. Good. You will need that. It was hardly a ringing endorsement, but Ronan seemed satisfied. After Dante left, Elena collapsed onto the couch. That was exhausting. You did well. He looked at me like I was a lamb being led to slaughter. Dante's protective. He's seen too many people in our world make bad choices for the wrong reasons. Ronan sat beside her, but he respects you. I could tell. How? He barely smiled. He spoke to you in English instead of making you struggle through Italian. That's Dante's version of approval. The meetings continued over the following weeks. Some went better than others. A woman named Isabetta, who controlled most of the gambling operations in Palermo, took an immediate liking to Elena and offered unsolicited advice about managing a household while your husband was committing felonies. A younger man called Franco seemed suspicious of Elena's motives until she called him out for being condescending, which apparently earned his respect. Through it all, Elena learned to navigate conversations that danced around the actual nature of Ronan's business, learned to read the subtle hierarchies, to understand when silence was agreement and when it was judgment. Learned that in this world, loyalty mattered more than morality, and respect was earned through strength, not sweetness. It was exhausting and exhilarating and occasionally terrifying. I feel like I'm in a crash course on a subject I never signed up for, she told Ronan one night after a particularly tense dinner with several of his key lieutenants. Like someone handed me a textbook in a language I don't speak and said, "Figure it out." You're doing better than you think. Luca pulled me aside tonight and told me I needed to be more careful about what I say in front of Carmine. Apparently, I accidentally insulted his territory by suggesting the restaurant I liked was in a better neighborhood. Ronan winced. Carmine's sensitive about geography. See? How am I supposed to know that? How am I supposed to remember who's allied with who has grudges against who, which territories are off limits for casual conversation? Elena threw up her hands. I'm a literature major from California. The most complicated politics I dealt with before this was department drama over office space. You're learning. That's all anyone can ask. I just don't want to be the reason something goes wrong. Don't want to accidentally start a war because I complimented the wrong person's restaurant choice. Ronan pulled her into his arms. You won't. And even if you made a mistake, which you haven't, that would be on them for being ridiculous, not on you for being human. Elena rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. When we get married, does that make me part of this? Like, officially? You're already part of this. The wedding just makes it formal. That's what I'm afraid of. He pulled back to look at her. Having second thoughts? No, maybe. I don't know. She rubbed her face. I love you. I want to marry you. But I'm also scared that once we do this, there's no going back, that I'll be locked into this world forever. But you can leave any time you want. Ring or no ring. I meant what I said. If this becomes too much, I'll let you go. I don't want to leave. That's not what I mean. Elena struggled to find the right words. I guess I'm just realizing that marrying you means becoming someone different. Elena Vale instead of Elena Hart. A crime boss's wife instead of a waitress figuring out her life. And I don't know if I'm ready to let go of who I was. You don't have to let go of anything. You just add to it. Ronan tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You're still the woman who spilled wine and made inappropriate jokes and challenged me when I was being an ass. The ring doesn't change that. Promise? Promise. But the ring did change things. Elena noticed it in small ways. The deference from staff at restaurants, the careful distance people maintained, the way conversation shifted when she entered a room. She was no longer just Elena. She was Ronan Vale's fiancée, and that carried weight she was still learning to balance. Work became complicated. Giuseppe kept treating her like she might shatter at any moment, and the other servers oscillated between overly friendly and carefully distant. Even Marco seemed uncertain how to interact with her now that she was engaged to his most important customer. You could quit, Ronan suggested one Thursday when Elena came home frustrated after a shift, where no one would let her carry more than one plate at a time. You don't need to work anymore. I like working. I like feeling useful. You are useful. You're, I'm what? Your fiancé? Your future wife. Elena shook her head. That's not enough for me, Ronan. I need to be my own person, not just an extension of you. I'm not asking you to be an extension of me. But that's what happens, isn't it? In your world, wives are accessories. pretty things to show off at dinners and keep safely tucked away the rest of the time. Ronan's expression hardened. Is that what you think I want? I don't know what you want. You keep saying I can be myself, but then everyone around me treats me like I'm made of glass. She was getting worked up now, frustration from weeks of navigating impossible social dynamics finally spilling over. And maybe that's not your fault directly, but it's the consequence of being with you, of being in this world. So what do you want me to do? I can't change how other people see you. I want you to see me, not as something fragile you need to protect, but as a partner who can handle the reality of your life. Elena's voice cracked. I survived being kidnapped, Ronan. I think I can handle carrying 2 plates at a restaurant without everyone acting like I'm going to collapse. They stared at each other across the kitchen, both breathing hard, and Elena realized this was their first real fight since the engagement. Not a small disagreement or a moment of tension, but an actual fight about things that mattered. You're right, Ronan said finally. You're absolutely right. I have been treating you like you're fragile, because the thought of losing you terrifies me in ways I can't even articulate. I'm terrified too, of losing you, of screwing this up, of becoming someone I don't recognize. Elena's anger deflated into something sadder. But we can't build a life together if you're constantly trying to wrap me in bubble wrap. I know. Do you? Because you have Luca assigned security every time I leave the house. You vetoed my idea to take night classes because the university is in a vulnerable area. You barely let me out of your sight unless I'm at work, and even then you probably have someone watching. I do have someone watching. Sophia's always there. See? That's exactly what I mean. Elena threw up her hands. I can't live like this. I can't be in a relationship where every move I make is monitored and controlled. It's not about control. It's about keeping you safe. It's about both, and I need you to understand the difference. She stepped closer, took his hands. I'm not asking you to stop caring about my safety. I'm asking you to trust that I can make smart decisions about my own life, that I can assess risk and take precautions without you micromanaging every detail. Ronan looked down at their joined hands. After Matteo died, I swore I'd never let anyone close enough to lose again. Then you happened, and I broke that promise to myself. And now every day I wake up terrified that someone will take you from me the way they took him. Elena's heart broke a little. I'm not Matteo. I'm not your son, and you can't protect me the way you wish you'd protected him. I know that. Intellectually, I know that. But the fear doesn't care about logic. Then we figure out how to live with the fear without letting it control us. She squeezed his hands. Because this, the overprotection, the control, the bubble wrap, it's not sustainable. Eventually, I'll either suffocate or explode. And I don't want either of those things to happen. They stood like that for a long moment, the kitchen quiet around them except for the distant sound of waves against rocks. Finally, Ronan pulled her close. I'll try, he said into her hair. I'll try to pull back to give you space, but you have to understand, this doesn't come naturally to me. My instinct is to control every variable, eliminate every threat. I know, and I'm not asking you to change overnight. Just to try. Elena pressed her face against his shoulder. We're both going to have to try. This isn't easy for either of us. No, he agreed. It's not. They made up the way couples do, with apologies and promises and the kind of honesty that only comes after fighting about things that matter. And the next morning, Ronan called Luca and told him to dial back the security presence. Not eliminate it entirely, that was apparently non-negotiable, but make it less obvious, less intrusive. Elena, for her part, tried to be more understanding about Ronan's need for control. Checked in when she was going to be late, let him know her general plans, accepted that some level of security was just the price of admission for this life. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The wedding planning became Elena's project, something she could control in a life that often felt beyond her grasp. She spent hours researching venues, interviewing caterers, debating flower arrangements with an intensity that made Ronan smile. You know, we could just elope, he suggested one afternoon when she was buried under fabric swatches for tablecloths. Absolutely not. I've been to exactly one wedding in my adult life, my cousin's disaster in Vegas, and I refuse to let that be my standard. She held up 2 nearly identical pieces of fabric. Ivory or cream, they look the same. They're completely different. Ivory has warm undertones, cream is cooler. It affects the whole aesthetic. Whatever you want. Elena threw a fabric swatch at him. You're supposed to have an opinion. My opinion is that you'll be beautiful regardless of tablecloth color. That's a cop-out answer and you know it, but she was smiling, and Ronan counted that as a win. They settled on a small ceremony at a villa overlooking the sea, just outside Palermo. 50 guests maximum, mostly Ronan's people, a few of Elena's friends from the restaurant, and Marco, who'd become something like a father figure to her over the past year. No extended family for either of them, since Elena's parents were gone, and Ronan had cut ties with most of his relatives years ago. It's going to be intimate, Elena told Giuseppe when he asked about catering. Good food, good company, no pretense. And security? Giuseppe asked knowingly. Lots of security, but hopefully discreet. Giuseppe laughed. With Ronan Vale's wedding, nothing will be discreet. He was right. The wedding became an event in Palermo's underworld, the kind of occasion that required careful planning and extensive security protocols. Luca coordinated everything with military precision, turning what should have been a simple celebration into something that required background checks and metal detectors. This is insane, Elena said 2 weeks before the wedding, watching Luca direct a team sweeping the venue for listening devices. We're getting married, not hosting a summit. In our world, they're basically the same thing, Ronan said. Your world is exhausting. Our world, he corrected gently. Like it or not, it's ours now. Elena leaned against him, watching the organized chaos. I do like it. Sometimes I don't want to, but I do. Is that weird? If it is, we're both weird. The week before the wedding, Elena had lunch with Isabella, who'd become an unexpected friend over the past few months. They met at a cafe near the water, Sophia maintaining her usual discreet distance. You're nervous, Isabella observed. Not a question. Terrified, Elena admitted. What if I'm making a huge mistake? What if I'm not cut out for this life? You survived Santoro. You have survived meeting Dante Russo, which some would argue is worse. Isabella sipped her espresso. You are stronger than you think. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm constantly one wrong move away from disaster. Welcome to being a woman in this world. We are always one wrong move from disaster. The trick is to make the right moves count more. Isabella leaned forward. Let me tell you something. When I married my husband 30 years ago, I was young and stupid and thought love would be enough. It wasn't. He died badly, and I was left with nothing but debts and enemies. I'm sorry. Don't be. I took what he left and built something better. Now I run more territory than he ever did, and I do it without the weaknesses that killed him. She met Elena's eyes. You have something I didn't have, a partner who actually respects you. Ronan listens when you speak. That is rare. Don't waste it. I won't. Good. And Elena, wear comfortable shoes to the wedding. You will be on your feet all day, and nobody cares if your heels are fashionable if you are limping. Elena laughed. That's your big advice? Comfortable shoes? It is better than most wedding advice you will receive. Trust me. The night before the wedding, Elena stayed at her old apartment, the one she'd never quite given up, kept just in case she needed somewhere that was entirely hers. It felt strange being there after months at the villa, but tradition was tradition, and Ronan had insisted on doing this part properly. She couldn't sleep, kept thinking about everything that had led to this moment, the spilled wine, the Thursday dinners, the kidnapping, the proposal. A year ago, she'd been a woman with no direction, running from anything that felt too permanent. Now she was hours away from marrying one of the most dangerous men in Sicily. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ronan. Can't sleep either. Elena smiled and typed back. Getting cold feet? Never. You? Terrified. But in a good way. That makes one of us. You're not scared? There was a long pause. Then, I'm terrified I'll wake up and this will all be a dream, that you'll realize you deserve better and disappear. Elena's throat tightened. She called instead of texting. Hi, Ronan answered on the first ring. Hi, you know I'm not going anywhere, right? I know, doesn't stop the fear. I'm scared too, that I'll mess this up, that I'll never be good enough for your world, that... She stopped herself. That what? That you'll wake up one day and realize you only wanted me because I was different from your life. And once I'm part of it, I'll just be another thing you manage instead of someone you love. Elena. His voice was rough. That's not going to happen. You can't know that. Yes, I can. Because you're not something I manage. You're the person who makes me remember why I'm alive. And that doesn't change just because we're making it official. She wiped at her eyes, annoyed to find herself crying. I love you. I love you too. Get some sleep. You too. See you tomorrow? Wouldn't miss it. Elena hung up and stared at her phone for a long moment. Then she got up, grabbed her laptop, and wrote Ronan a letter. Not about fear or doubt, but about all the things she wanted to say and probably wouldn't manage during the ceremony. About how he'd changed her life, challenged her, made her braver than she'd ever thought possible. About how she was choosing this, choosing him, with eyes wide open and zero regrets. She sealed the letter in an envelope and texted Sophia to deliver it in the morning. Then, finally, she slept. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, warm breeze, the kind of day that made you believe in good omens. Elena got ready surrounded by the few girlfriends she'd made in Palermo, including Isabella, who showed up with expensive champagne and a knowing smile. You look beautiful, Isabella said when Elena finally put on the dress, a simple silk gown that somehow managed to be elegant without being fussy. I look terrified. That too, but mostly beautiful. Isabella handed her a glass of champagne. To new beginnings and comfortable shoes. Elena laughed and drank. The ceremony was held on a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean, the same view Ronan had shown her on their first real date. 50 chairs arranged in neat rows, flowers everywhere, and security that tried very hard to be invisible. When the music started and Elena began her walk down the aisle, she saw Ronan at the end waiting for her. He was wearing a dark suit that made his gray eyes look silver, and his expression when he saw her was worth every moment of doubt she'd had. She'd written vows, had them memorized, but when the moment came, the carefully chosen words disappeared. I spilled wine on you, she said instead. And you didn't run. You could have. Should have, probably. But you didn't, and neither did I. That's what this is. Choosing not to run even when it's hard, even when it's scary. I choose you, Ronan. I choose this life. I choose us. Ronan's vows were simpler. You brought me back to life when I'd forgotten what living felt like. I will spend the rest of my days being worthy of that gift. I love you, Elena. That's all I know, and it's enough. The officiant pronounced them married, and when Ronan kissed her, Elena heard cheers from the assembled guests and thought about all the impossible ways life could surprise you. The reception was loud and joyful and exactly what Elena had wanted. Giuseppe had outdone himself with the food. The wine flowed freely. People laughed and told stories and celebrated like this was more than just a wedding, like it was a declaration that hope could exist even in dark places. Dante Russo gave a speech about loyalty and family that made Elena cry. Isabella told an embarrassing story about Ronan from 20 years ago that made him blush. Luca, surprisingly, got drunk and serenaded them with an old Sicilian song that was either beautiful or terrible, depending on your tolerance for off-key crooning. But the best part was late in the evening, when the crowd had thinned and Elena found herself slow dancing with her husband under strings of lights while the sea whispered against rocks below. Happy? Ronan asked. Incredibly. No regrets? Not a single one. She looked up at him. You? Just one. Her heart dropped. What? That I didn't spill the wine myself that first night would have saved us both a lot of time. Elena laughed and kissed him, and somewhere in the background someone started playing music again, and the celebration continued into the night. The honeymoon lasted exactly 3 days before reality came crashing back in. They'd gone to a small island off the coast, a place Ronan owned through one of his many shell companies. No security detail, no business calls, just 3 days of pretending they were ordinary people on an ordinary vacation. Elena had almost convinced herself it could last. Then Ronan's phone rang at 2 a.m. on their 4th night, and she watched his face shift from relaxed to razor-sharp in the time it took him to say hello. When? He asked, already getting out of bed. How many? I'll be there in 3 hours. He hung up and started pulling on clothes with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. What happened? Elena asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Warehouse fire, one of our main storage facilities in Catania. Luca thinks it was arson. Ronan was strapping on his shoulder holster now, the gun a stark reminder of the life they'd briefly escaped. I need to go handle this. I'm coming with you. Elena, I'm your wife now. That means I don't get left behind when things get complicated. She was already getting dressed. Besides, you promised. No more bubble wrap, remember? Ronan looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him. Stay close to me. Do exactly what I say. If I tell you to leave, you leave. Deal? Deal. The drive back to Sicily was tense and silent. When they arrived at the warehouse district, the fire was mostly out, but smoke still poured from the charred remains of a building that had apparently held millions in product. Luca met them at the perimeter, his face grim. 3 casualties. All ours. Whoever did this knew the security schedules, knew where to hit for maximum damage. He glanced at Elena, then back to Ronan. We need to talk, privately. Anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of my wife. The word still felt strange on Elena's tongue, but she appreciated Ronan claiming it so firmly. Luca hesitated, then nodded. We think it was the Corsicans. Retaliation for the Marseille situation. They've been making noise for months about wanting a bigger piece of the shipping routes. Let them make noise. We're not giving up territory. They're not asking anymore. This was a declaration. Luca pulled out his phone, showed them photos of graffiti spray painted on a nearby wall. Elena couldn't read the Italian, but the skull and crossbones were universal enough. Ronan's jaw tightened. Set up a meeting. Tell them we're willing to negotiate. You're not actually going to negotiate, Elena said. It wasn't a question. No, but I need them to think I am. He looked at her. Can you give us a few minutes? It was the first test of their agreement, and Elena recognized it for what it was. She could push, could insist on staying, could prove she wasn't going to be shut out, or she could trust that some conversations genuinely needed to happen without her. I'll be in the car, she said. Sophia appeared from somewhere. Apparently even the honeymoon hadn't been completely security-free, and escorted Elena back to the vehicle. They sat in silence while men in expensive suits moved around outside, having conversations Elena couldn't hear but could easily imagine. Does it ever get easier, she asked Sophia. Knowing what they do? Living with the violence? Sophia was quiet for a moment. You learn to compartmentalize, to separate the man you love from the work he does. But easy? No. It never gets easy. How long have you worked for Ronan? 5 years, since my husband was killed by the Albanians. Sophia's face was expressionless. Ronan took care of the men responsible, gave me a job when no one else would. I owe him my life. What va passer aujourd'hui? Elena wanted to ask more, wanted to understand this world she'd married into, these people who pledged loyalty to a man who operated outside every conventional moral boundary. But before she could, Ronan was striding back to the car, his expression unreadable. We're leaving, he said. Luca's handling the rest. The drive back to the villa was silent. Elena could see the tension in Ronan's shoulders, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel too tight. When they finally pulled through the gates, he sat in the parked car for a long moment before speaking. I need to tell you something, he said, and I need you to really hear it. Okay. The Corsicans, this won't end with a meeting. It won't end with negotiation. This is going to get ugly, and it's going to get ugly fast, and I need to know if you can handle that. Elena turned in her seat to face him. What are you asking me? I'm asking if you can live with me starting a war, because that's what this is going to be. A war over territory and respect and all the things that matter in my world. And I won't be the quiet man in the corner booth while it's happening. I'll be the person making calls that get people killed. Have you ever been the quiet man in the corner booth? Really? With you I was, or I tried to be. Ronan finally looked at her. But that's not who I am, not fully. And I've been wondering when you'd realize that and leave. Stop waiting for me to leave. I'm not going to. Elena took his hand. I married you knowing exactly what you were. A man capable of great tenderness and great violence. A man who loves fiercely and fights the same way. You don't get to scare me off by showing me sides of yourself I've already seen. You haven't seen this side. Not really. Then show me. Let me in instead of trying to protect me from reality. She squeezed his hand. I'm tougher than you think, Ronan, and I'm tired of you acting like I'm going to shatter. Something shifted in his expression, a decision being made in real time. All right, but once I show you this, you don't get to unsee it. You understand? I understand. Over the next 3 weeks, Ronan kept his promise. He didn't hide the late-night meetings, the tense phone calls, the strategic discussions about moving against the Corsicans. Elena sat in on sessions where men talked casually about breaking legs and burning warehouses. She learned the language of violence, the euphemisms and code words that made brutality sound like business. It was horrifying and fascinating in equal measure. "You're taking this well," Isabella observed one afternoon when they met for coffee. "Most new brides would be having nervous breakdowns." "Who says I'm not?" Elena stirred sugar into her espresso. "I just hide it better." "Good. The moment you show weakness, the vultures will circle." Isabella's expression softened slightly. "But seriously, how are you managing?" "Compartmentalizing, just like Sophia said." Elena stared into her cup. "I separate the man who brings me coffee in bed from the man who ordered someone's kneecaps broken last Tuesday. It's the only way to stay sane." "That works for a while, but eventually you have to integrate the two versions, except that they're the same person." "And if I can't?" "Then you leave before it destroys you both." Isabella leaned forward. "I have seen women try to change their men, try to save them from this life. It never works. You either accept all of him or none of him. There's no middle ground." Elena thought about this on the drive home, about the different versions of Ronan she'd encountered, the grieving father, the protective lover, the cold strategist planning violence with the same focus he brought to everything else. They were all him. All pieces of a complicated man who'd chosen a complicated life. Could she accept all of it? The question haunted her. The answer came 2 nights later when Elena woke to find Ronan's side of the bed empty. She found him in his study, staring at photos of the warehouse casualties, 3 men, all with families, all dead because they'd been in the wrong place when the Corsicans attacked. "I knew their names," Ronan said without looking up. Pietro had a daughter getting married next month. Antonio was sending money back to his mother in Naples. Marco, his voice cracked slightly. Marco had just found out his wife was pregnant. Elena came to stand behind him, wrapped her arms around his shoulders. "It's not your fault." "Yes, it is. They worked for me, died because of me. They died because someone else chose violence. You didn't light that fire, Ronan." "I might as well have. My business, my territory, my war. Their blood is on my hands." He turned to look at her, and his eyes were red. "How can you stand to touch me knowing that?" It was the most vulnerable she'd ever seen him, this man who usually wore his power like armor. And in that moment, Elena understood what Isabella had meant about integration. This wasn't a monster separate from the man she loved. This was her husband, carrying the weight of impossible choices, trying to protect his people and his empire while still holding on to whatever pieces of his humanity remained. "I stand to touch you because you care that they died," she said softly. "Because you're not some sociopath who sees people as expendable. You're someone doing terrible things for complicated reasons, and you carry the cost of every decision. That's more human than you give yourself credit for. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it real. And I'd rather live with real and complicated than simple and false." She pulled him up from the chair, led him back to bed. "Come on, you need sleep. I need to finish planning the response. The Corsicans have to pay for this." "They will, tomorrow. Tonight you're a husband who just lost 3 men. Let yourself feel that." So he did. Ronan held on to Elena like she was an anchor, and she let him grieve for men he'd failed to protect. And somewhere in the darkness of that night, they both understood that this was marriage too. Not just the celebration and romance, but the hard moments where you held space for each other's pain. The war with the Corsicans lasted 6 weeks. 6 weeks of strategic strikes and counterstrikes, of territory changing hands and blood being spilled on both sides. Ronan moved through it with cold efficiency, and Elena watched her husband transform into something sharper, more dangerous. But he came home every night, collapsed into bed beside her and let her hold him while he processed whatever violence the day had required. And slowly, Elena learned to hold both truths at once, that Ronan was capable of terrible things and that she loved him anyway. The turning point came when Ronan received an unexpected visitor, a Corsican named Laurent, second in command to the man who'd ordered the warehouse fire. He arrived under flag of truce, requesting a face-to-face meeting. It's a trap, Luca said immediately. Maybe, but it's also an opportunity. Ronan looked at Elena. What do you think? She blinked. You're asking my opinion on strategy? You see things differently than we do, fresh perspective. He waited. Elena considered. If it's a trap, they'll be expecting you to come heavily armed and paranoid. What if you do the opposite? Meet somewhere public, minimal security, show you're not afraid of them. Luca looked skeptical. That's incredibly risky. All of this is incredibly risky, Elena pointed out. But sometimes the unexpected move is the right one. Ronan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. We'll meet at the cafe on Via Roma, tomorrow afternoon. Just me and Luca. And me, Elena added. Absolutely not. Hear me out. If this is a legitimate peace offering, having your wife there shows you're serious about ending the violence, that you have something to lose beyond money and territory. It humanizes you. It also makes you a target. I'm already a target. We established that when Santoro kidnapped me. She met his eyes. Let me do this. Let me help. Against everyone's better judgment, Ronan agreed. The meeting happened on a Tuesday afternoon at a cafe crowded with tourists and locals. Laurent arrived with one bodyguard, mirroring Ronan's minimal security. They sat at an outdoor table, while Elena and the bodyguards maintained a polite distance at nearby tables. Elena couldn't hear most of the conversation, but she watched the body language, the initial tension, the careful negotiation, and finally, something that looked like grudging agreement. When Ronan stood and shook Laurent's hand, Elena knew the war was over. What happened? She asked on the drive home. We agreed to split the disputed territory. Neither side wins completely, but we both get enough to save face. Ronan glanced at her. Your idea worked. Laurent said bringing you showed I was serious about peace, that I had something worth protecting beyond my empire. So I'm a strategic asset now? Elena tried to keep her tone light. You're my wife. But yes, you're also someone these men respect. That matters in this world. Elena wasn't sure how she felt about being respected by criminals for her strategic value, but she'd process that later. The truce held. Slowly, life returned to something resembling normal. Ronan spent less time in crisis mode and more time actually being present. Elena found her rhythm in this new life, working part-time at the restaurant because she wanted to, not because she needed to, taking literature classes at the university, becoming involved in charity work that Isabetta had introduced her to. You're different, Ronan observed one Thursday evening. They still kept the tradition of Thursday dinners, though now at home instead of Osteria della Luna. Stronger, more confident. I had to be. This life doesn't leave room for uncertainty. Elena poured more wine. But yeah, I'm different. Is that a problem? Not at all. I like who you're becoming. Good. Because I'm not done becoming her yet. 6 months after the Corsican truce, Elena missed her period, then missed another one. The pregnancy test sat on the bathroom counter for 20 minutes before she could make herself look at it. 2 lines. Positive. She stared at it for a long time, trying to process the tangle of emotions. Joy, terror, hope, fear. A baby. She was going to have a baby. They were going to have a baby. In this life, in this world. The thought paralyzed her. Elena sat on the bathroom floor for an hour before Ronan found her, still holding the positive test. Elena? He knelt beside her. What's wrong? What? He saw the test, went completely still. Is that positive? I'm pregnant. The words felt surreal. Ronan took the test with shaking hands, stared at it like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. We're having a baby. Are we insane? Bringing a child into this world, your world? Elena's voice cracked. What kind of mother plans to raise a baby around guns and bodyguards and casual discussions of violence? The kind who will protect that baby with everything she has. Ronan set down the test and took her hands. Elena, look at me. Are you happy about this? Setting aside all the complications, all the fear, are you happy? She made herself really consider the question, found the answer underneath all the terror. Yes, she whispered. I'm terrified, but yes, I'm happy. Then we'll figure out the rest. He pulled her into his arms. We'll figure out how to keep our child safe. how to give them a good life despite everything. We'll do what parents have always done, the best we can with what we have. What if it's not enough? What if it is? He pulled back to look at her. I've failed at this before, Elena. I lost Matteo, and that will haunt me forever. But that doesn't mean I'll fail again. We won't let fear win. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love and intention would be enough to protect this new life growing inside her. I need you to promise me something, Elena said. I need you to promise that our child won't grow up the way Matteo did. Separate from your business, but still vulnerable because of it. If we're doing this, we do it honestly. We create a life where safety doesn't depend on secrets. Ronan was quiet for a long moment. That means changing things, fundamentally changing how I operate. I know. It won't happen overnight. I know that too, but I need to know you're willing to try. That you want our child to have better than what we had to give Matteo. I want that more than anything. He pressed his forehead against hers. I'll do whatever it takes. I promise. The pregnancy changed everything. Ronan became even more protective, which Elena had thought was impossible. But he also became more strategic about his business, more careful about the risks he took. He started delegating more to Luca, started pulling back from the day-to-day violence. I'm not retiring, he told Elena when she asked about it. But I'm restructuring, making the operation less dependent on my direct involvement, building something more sustainable. For the baby. For all of us. I want to be there, Elena. Actually there, not just physically present while my mind is on the next crisis. I want to be a real father this time. She believed him. And over the months that followed, she watched him actually do the work of change. It wasn't smooth. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves, times when he reverted to control and overprotection. But he kept trying. They turned one of the villa's rooms into a nursery. Elena painted the walls a soft yellow, while Ronan assembled furniture with the kind of intense focus he usually reserved for criminal strategy. They argued about baby names, about parenting philosophies, about whether their child would learn Italian or English first. Normal couple arguments, the kind that felt like a gift after everything they'd been through. Elena went into labor on a Thursday, which felt cosmically appropriate. Ronan drove too fast to the hospital, held her hand through 17 hours of labor, and cried when the doctor placed their daughter in his arms. She's perfect, he said, voice thick with emotion. Elena, she's perfect. Their daughter, Isabella Maria Vale, named for Isabetta and Ronan's mother, came into the world with a full head of dark hair and her father's gray eyes. She was small and loud and demanding, and Elena fell in love so hard and fast it hurt. Hi, sweetheart, she whispered, holding Isabella for the first time. Welcome to our crazy life. Sorry in advance for all the complicated stuff. Ronan laughed through tears. We'll do better by you, I promise. And he meant it. Elena could see it in the way he looked at their daughter, the fierce protectiveness mixed with genuine tenderness. This wasn't about replacing what he'd lost. This was about honoring it by doing better. The first few months were chaos. Sleepless nights, endless feedings, the particular exhaustion that came with caring for a newborn. But they navigated it together, learning as they went, making mistakes, and forgiving them. Ronan surprised Elena by being a natural at the practical stuff, changing diapers, soothing Isabella at 3 a.m., figuring out the mystery of why she was crying this time. He took paternity leave, an idea that apparently shocked his entire organization. Dante called me soft, Ronan reported one afternoon while Isabella slept on his chest. Said I'd gone domestic. And what did you say? That he could call me whatever he wanted as long as he understood that my family comes first now. Business is business, but this... He looked down at Isabella. This is everything. Elena's heart swelled. This was the man she'd married, not the crime boss or the grieving father or the protective husband, but all of those things integrated into someone trying to be better for the people he loved. Isabella was 6 months old when Elena found Ronan in the nursery late one night, holding their sleeping daughter and talking to her in soft Italian. What are you saying to her? Elena asked from the doorway. Telling her about her brother, about Matteo. Ronan looked up. I want her to know about him, know that she had a brother who loved music and books, and was braver than I ever gave him credit for. Elena came to stand beside him. He'd be happy you're doing this, being present for her. I hope so, Ronan gently laid Isabella in her crib. I think about him every day. Wonder what he'd be like now if he'd gotten to grow up. But it doesn't hurt the same way anymore. It doesn't consume me. Because you're letting yourself live again instead of just surviving. Because you taught me the difference. He pulled Elena close. I was dead inside when you spilled that wine, just going through motions, waiting for my own ending. And you crashed into my life and reminded me that I still had a future worth living for. We both had futures we weren't living. We just needed each other to see them. Elena rested her head against his shoulder, looking down at their sleeping daughter. This is what I was running from all those years. Real connection, real commitment. I was terrified of getting hurt, so I just kept moving. And now? Now I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and I'm not running anymore. They stood like that for a long time, watching Isabella sleep, both of them thinking about the impossible series of events that had led to this moment. A spilled glass of wine, a Thursday night tradition, a kidnapping that should have ended them but somehow made them stronger. Life was strange like that. The worst moments and the best moments tangled together until you couldn't have one without the other. A year after Isabella's birth, Ronan did something unprecedented. He called a meeting of all his major associates and announced he was transitioning leadership to Luca. Not immediately, not completely, but gradually over the next 5 years. I've spent 30 years building this empire, he told the assembled men, and I'm not walking away from it, but I'm also not letting it consume the rest of my life. My family deserves more. I deserve more. The room was silent. Then Dante Russo started clapping. Slowly, others joined in. About time, Dante said. We were starting to worry you'd forgotten what actually matters. After the meeting, Luca pulled Ronan aside. You're sure about this? More sure than I've been about anything. Ronan looked at his second-in-command. You're ready. You've been ready for years, and I trust you to keep this thing running without me micromanaging every decision. What will you do? Ronan smiled. Live. Actually live instead of just moving through days. Spend time with my wife and daughter. Maybe finally learn to cook those recipes Giuseppe's been trying to teach me. The kingpin becomes a house husband. Never thought I'd see it. I'm still the kingpin, just a part-time one. Ronan's expression turned serious. But Luca, if anything happens to my family, if anyone tries what Santoro tried, they'll have to go through all of us. You have my word. The transition took time. Ronan didn't become a different person overnight. There were still moments when he reverted to old patterns, when the need for control overwhelmed everything else. But he kept working at it, kept choosing his family over his empire, kept proving that people could change if they wanted it badly enough. Elena watched her husband transform from a man defined by grief and violence into someone more balanced, more whole. Not perfect. Ronan would never be perfect, but genuine in his effort to be better. And she changed too. The woman who'd spilled wine on a stranger's table became someone confident in her own power, comfortable in a world she'd never imagined inhabiting. She took over several of Ronan's charitable foundations, using his money to actually help people instead of just laundering it through legitimate causes. Found purpose in building something positive from the ruins of violence. Isabella grew into a bright, stubborn toddler who had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. She learned to walk, to talk, to demand exactly what she wanted with the kind of certainty that suggested she'd inherited both parents' determination. On Isabella's second birthday, Elena found herself back at Osteria della Luna for the first time in months. Giuseppe had insisted on catering the party, and the restaurant's private room was filled with friends, some legitimate, some decidedly not, but all genuinely happy to celebrate this strange family they'd become part of. Marco, the owner, pulled Elena aside during the celebration. I remember the night you spilled that wine, he said with a smile. Thought you'd be fired by morning. I thought I was going to get murdered by a crime boss I'd just soaked with Chianti. And instead you married him. Life is funny like that. Hilarious. But Elena was smiling. Thank you, Marco, for giving me that job, for introducing me to this world. I know it wasn't what you intended, but it was exactly what was supposed to happen. I saw how Ronan looked at you even that first night. Like someone had turned on a light in a dark room. Marco patted her hand. You're good for him. Good for all of us. The party continued late into the evening. Isabella fell asleep in Ronan's arms while Dante told stories about the old days and Isabetta argued with Giuseppe about proper risotto technique. It was chaotic and warm, and exactly the kind of chosen family Elena had always wanted, but never thought she'd find. Later, after everyone had left and Isabella was tucked into bed, Elena and Ronan sat on their terrace overlooking the sea. The same view from their wedding, from 1,000 quiet moments before. Happy? Ronan asked, pulling her close. Impossibly so. Elena rested her head on his shoulder. 3 years ago, if someone had told me I'd be married to a Sicilian crime boss with a toddler and 0 regrets, I would have thought they were insane. Would you have believed them if they'd told you that crime boss would be the happiest he'd ever been? Probably not. You weren't exactly radiating joy when we met. I was radiating nothing. That was the problem. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You changed everything, Elena. Gave me reasons to keep living instead of just existing. I don't say it enough, but thank you. You don't need to thank me for loving you. That's the easiest thing I've ever done. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to waves and wind and the distant sounds of Palermo at night. Two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way, who'd survived violence and loss and impossible choices, who'd built something real from the wreckage of their separate griefs. I've been thinking, Elena said eventually, about opening a bookstore. Something small, nothing fancy. A place where people can come read and drink coffee and just exist without pressure. I think that's a great idea. Yeah? She looked up at him. You don't think it's impractical? That I should focus on the foundations or the family, or I think you should do whatever makes you happy. You've spent enough time supporting my ambitions. Time to pursue your own. Ronan smiled. Besides, Isabella needs to learn that her mother is more than just her father's wife, that she's her own person with her own dreams. Elena's eyes stung. Even after everything, Ronan could still surprise her with his understanding. I love you, she said. I love you too, more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. Inside, Isabella cried out in her sleep. Both of them moved to get up, but Ronan waved Elena back down. I've got her. You relax. She watched him go, this man who'd been so broken when they met, who'd slowly pieced himself back together through love and intention and the daily choice to be better. Not perfect, never perfect, but genuine in his effort to deserve the second chance life had given him. And Elena understood something important then. This was the real story, not the dramatic rescue or the romantic proposal or even the beautiful wedding. Those were just moments. The real story was in all the small choices that came after. The decision to stay when leaving would be easier. The effort to integrate instead of compartmentalize. The daily work of loving someone complicated and being loved despite your own complications. That was the thing about broken people finding each other. They didn't magically heal each other. Healing was work. Messy, imperfect, ongoing work that required showing up every day and choosing to try. But when you found someone willing to do that work alongside you, someone who saw all your jagged edges and loved you anyway, that was worth every risk, every moment of fear, every impossible choice. Elena thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, running from connection and calling it freedom. That woman would have been terrified of this life, would have seen the danger and the complications and bolted. But that woman had never known what it felt like to be truly seen, to be loved not despite who she was, but because of it. Ronan came back carrying a wide-awake Isabella who was babbling happily about something only she understood. Someone's not going back to sleep, he said, settling into the chair with their daughter. Give her here. I'll try. Elena reached for Isabella, but the little girl shook her head and clung to her father. Looks like I'm on duty. Ronan didn't seem to mind. You were saying something about a bookstore? So Elena talked about her plans while Ronan listened, and Isabella eventually dozed off again between them. They stayed on the terrace until the sun started to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A new day. Another chance to get it right. And as the city woke up around them, Elena understood that this was happiness. Not the absence of problems or fear or complicated choices, but the presence of people worth facing those things for. She'd stopped running, had planted roots so deep they'd be impossible to pull up now, even if she wanted to. And she didn't want to. This was home. This strange, imperfect, beautiful life they'd built from spilled wine and Thursday dinners and the refusal to give up on each other. This was enough. More than enough. This was everything. Years later, when Isabella was older and asking questions about how her parents met, Elena would think back to that first night in Osteria della Luna, would remember the moment when their lives collided over a tray of dirty dishes and a bottle of red wine. Sometimes the most important moments in your life start with accidents, with being in the wrong place at the right time, with crashing into someone and choosing to stay instead of running. And sometimes the scariest thing you can do is let yourself be seen by someone who has every reason to stay closed off, to choose vulnerability over safety, connection over control. Elena had been running from that kind of intimacy her entire adult life, and Ronan had been buried under grief so thick he'd forgotten what it felt like to want more than survival. But they'd found each other anyway, had built something real from the wreckage of their separate losses, had proven that people could change, could heal, could create futures they'd stopped believing were possible. Not because they were perfect, not because love solved everything, but because they kept choosing each other. Every single day, through violence and peace, through fear and joy, through all the impossible complications of building a life together. That was the real story, the one worth telling. Two broken people who crashed into each other and refused to let go, who learned that sometimes the best things in life start with mistakes, that healing isn't about becoming undamaged, but about finding someone willing to hold your hand while you carry your scars, and that family isn't about blood or convention or doing everything right. It's about showing up, being honest, loving fiercely even when it's terrifying. That was what Elena and Ronan had built. What they were still building, one Thursday at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of staying instead of running. And as the sun rose fully over Palermo, painting their terrace in golden light, Elena looked at her husband and daughter and felt a certainty she'd spent her whole life searching for. This was exactly where she was supposed to be. And she was finally, completely home.